Welcome, Slayer the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Dudes Talking Metal. For this episode, we are going to be paying tribute to guitarist John Sykes, who, as of the making of this video, recently passed away at the age of 65. Uh, I have some albums here that John played in various bands. I'm going to show you here some of the records that I have. This is not his complete discography, but uh, he got his early start with Tigers of Pantang. I have two of their records, Spellbound
Crazy
and
Nights.
Crazy Nights. You can see on the back here. Spellbound, this era of the Tigers of Pantang. If you've never heard them, they're a new wave of British heavy metal band. Think maybe like the first Def Leppard album. This is an excellent record. I love this record. If you've never heard it, definitely check that out. And then he went and played with Thin Lizzy, and he was on Thin Lizzy's last studio record, Thunder and Lightning, which a lot of people would say is Thin Lizzy's maybe their most metal sounding record. He was also on the live album. On this record, it's John Sykes and Scott Gorham, and he was also on the live record that came out after that for that tour. And this is him and Snowy White on guitar. He was with Whitesnake on the US version of the Slide It In record. This is kind of confusing. There's a UK and a US version. This is the US version, which John was on. And he was also on the self-titled, this is from 1987. These Spellbound and Crazy Nights are from 81. Thunder and Lightning is from 83. The live album is from 83. Slide It In is from 84. And the self-titled Whitesnake album, this is their big breakout album, Here I Go Again, and all that Still the Night, that was 87. And then the last album that I have, and he released more than one Blue Murder record, but this is the first Blue Murder album. This came out in 1989. It was a super group of sorts with Carmine Appice and on drums and Tony Franklin on bass. John is a very unique guitar player in the sense that I always felt like he was one of those guitar players that as soon as you heard him, you knew it was him. He had a ton of chops, but he was still very much a blues-based player. He wasn't a neoclassical Yngwie type of speed guy. He was a blues-based player, but he just had a ton of chops. He had a killer guitar sound that carries through most of these records. He also had, I think, three or four solo albums. Unfortunately, I always felt that John Sykes maybe never got the recognition that he deserved, and I think some of that might have been because when he was with Tigers of Pantang, they were never a band that really broke particularly big. When he was with Thin Lizzy, he came in on the last Thin Lizzy studio album. When he was with Whitesnake, unfortunately, with the self-titled record did not tour with that album. He was out of the band. The videos for the songs from that record had Adrian Vandenberg and Vivian Campbell in them. So it was one of those cases where I think a lot of people maybe didn't even realize he played on the
Yeah.
records back in that time, which is unfortunate because that was a huge, huge album that sold millions and millions of copies, and maybe that could have been his chance to for his name to become a little bit more well known. The Blue Murder album did get some video play on MTV. I remember that and some recognition, but I think they only released two or three studio records, and then it was the late 80s, the 90s came around. And then unfortunately, John was sort of out of the scene for some time. His last studio solo album was Nuclear Cowboy in 2000, and that was really the last that we heard from him. So he was always kind of like one of those guitar players, like maybe like Vito Bratta from White Lion or Jakey Lee for some time before Jakey Lee came back out, where you were kind of like, hey, what happened to John Sykes? Everybody, I wish he would put out some records or get involved in some things or do something, because again, he was a phenomenal guitar and he had an amazing voice too. That's something else to mention too. He was an absolutely phenomenal singer, as he was the lead vocalist in Blue Murder. So it was really shocking. I think nobody knew that he was that he was ill. So this is really shocking news. He's an amazing guitar player, amazing voice, a very unique talent, and it's sad to see him pass away at the age of 65. So we're going to go around here, and everybody's going to share some thoughts about John Sykes. So Tony, you want to start us off with some of your thoughts on the passing of John Sykes?
Yeah, that one hit me hard yesterday. I was scrolling on Facebook and I saw it, and I was like, oh, there's so much, fake news deaths that you hear about. So I said, it's probably not true. And then I started seeing more and more. And I actually messaged Butch Jones, a mutual friend of ours.
Yeah,
He's a
he's a big fan of John Sykes.
huge
Yeah.
fan. And I was like, what do you know? He goes, everybody's hitting me up. Everybody's telling me this. So, yeah, and it turns out it was true. And, I listened to Eddie Trunk's podcast today, and that Eddie was friends with John, and that's like his favorite guitarist and all. And he was saying that it's a possibility that since John was kind of just more had gone into seclusion and wasn't communicating with people very much, that it's a possibility he could have passed at the end of the year of 2024, because his website has a photo of his guitar, his famous 78 Les Paul with spotlight, and it says has his birth date, and it says death date is 2024.
Mm.
And so it's a possibility he did. There's some speculation about that now, whether he's been dead for several weeks and they just announced it. But I guess we'll find out as time rolls on. But he is in my top five guitar players. I mean, sometimes I'd say between him and Michael Schenker, I don't know who's my favorite, because they both have such a unique sound that distinguishes them. When you hear their solos, you know it's them.
Mhm.
Um, John Sykes was so influential to so many guitar players. I mean, people like Zach Wilde, for instance, he took a lot from John Sykes, because John Sykes had this distinct vibrato that he does, like with his guitar, and he does all these squeals, and
Mhm.
like the pick harmonics, or whatever you call it. It's the terminology for it, but it's a lot of stuff that you see in other players. And he could make that guitar cry, and nobody sounded like he had a lot. His sound was very, very gainy. It's just
Mhm.
very, very loud. Um, you know, um, I know in his history, um, he he auditioned for some other bands as well. He auditioned for Ozzy
Mhm.
back before he got the Thin Lizzy gig. He auditioned for Ozzy and didn't get the gig, but he ended up in Thin Lizzy. But later on, I think when did Steve Clark pass away? Was that like 91 or something? 90?
Yeah, early 90s, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, or 89 maybe, or something. Yeah, he auditioned for Def Leppard, and he also auditioned for Guns N' Roses
Wow.
there when they had, like, I think maybe Bumblefoot was the one that got the gig. But if you know his history, the way he plays, the conflicts he's had with various people that he's played with, it's wondering, how he really could get along with some of these other groups. The guys in Def Leppard said that he was great to work with, but I also was thinking, by the time of Hysteria and Adrenalize, they were all using processors. No, they didn't have
Hmm.
amps on stage. John Sykes is all about volume. I mean, he's got Marshalls behind him, and he loves that. And you just got to imagine that just would not work in Def Leppard. In today's Def Leppard, if he had joined them in High and Dry period, yeah, it would have been great. But yeah, he kind of marches to his own beat. He Eddie Trunk brought up the fact that he feels like one of the reasons he's been in seclusion for so long, or he's just got to the point where he would not trust anybody into business, is because he got screwed pretty bad on that in that Whitesnake
Yeah.
situation. He and Coverdale had a falling out. He gets fired from the band. The videos come out that he's not in the videos. You got other guys miming to his stuff, and the record skyrockets to the top. I think it's 8 times platinum. And but he did retain his publishing, so he's lived comfortably off of that record for years. But he didn't get that notoriety. I mean, you should, Pete, when you think of John Sykes, you should think of, I mean, he should be thought of in this, as like maybe somebody like Slash. Everybody knows Slash. People should
Hmm.
know John Sykes. He's just he's such an innovator in his style, and he was a full-on rock star. I mean, just he had the look, the
Yeah.
sound, everything that you think of as a rock star. So he's just there's been nobody else like him, you know. And I've always just it's a shame that he and Coverdale couldn't have patched things up and maybe done one more album together, because that's what people really wanted, and people really wanted to see a Blue Murder reunion as well with Carmine Appice and Tony Franklin. I think they talked about it, just never happened. And then of course there's the time that Eddie Trunk had him on the That Metal show with Mike Portnoy, and they announced that they had a new band. I think the band was going to be called Bad Apple, and it Mike Portnoy said they recorded a bunch of stuff, and basically John just kind of ghosted him. So he moves on with Richie Kotzen and forms the Winery Dogs. So,
Interesting.
and then of course, there's this whole album that's been recorded now. It's been recorded for like, 12, 13 years that he has just never released. So maybe someday we'll see that'll see the light of day. But I'm a massive fan. I mean, I can show you. I dug out all my stuff. I've got so much stuff. And we can go on and talk. Everybody go around. If you want to come back around, I'll show you some cool stuff that
Okay.
I've got, because I've got a pretty big collection of John Sykes memorabilia. Just all his music anyway. Because like I said, I am a big fan.
Cool. All right, Darren, what are your thoughts?
Uh, I just want to echo what Tony said. That Whitesnake 1987 album, man, it's a huge album. And Whitesnake is basically a household name, but John Sykes' involvement is kind of unfairly
Hmm.
like a footnote. And he wrote that entire album with the exception of Crying in the Rain. I think that was Coverdale and Bernie Marsden. And Here I Go Again. Both of them were released on previous Whitesnake albums, but Here I Go Again was Coverdale. But every other song on that album was Coverdale and Sykes, and that album is huge. I mean, people that to the uninitiated, just general rock fan, I mean, they know who Whitesnake is, and it's because of the songs that he wrote. So it really feels unfair that he's kind of like not in that. He never got the fame that he deserved from that album. But moving back, I first became aware of who John Sykes was through Whitesnake. I got slided in 1984, and I saw the video for is it Slow and Easy,
Yeah.
and John Sykes was one of the cooler looking members of the band. And I saw the video before I bought the album, so um, after I saw the video, but the song was thought the song was great, and then I bought the album and I listened to the album over and over again. I still love that album. I think it's a fantastic album. Some of the songs are a little bit overplayed, but they're so good. I don't mind them because I can still listen to it. Uh, but everything about the album, the production is great. The songs are great. And so that's when I really became aware of John Sykes. And then after that, um, I was talking to a friend of mine about hard rock and heavy metal, and he said, "Well, if you like this stuff, you should check out Tigers of Pantang." And I'd seen pictures, I'd seen their name mentioned in rock magazines, but I never heard anything. And then he let me borrow his copy of Spellbound, and I just love that. So John Sykes was always on my radar, but I felt like for as good a guitar player as he was, I mean, he had it all. I mean, he was a great guitar player. He had like you said, John, he had a great voice, really good singing voice, which surprised me when Blue Murder came, and it kind of came out of nowhere in the '90s. I just saw it, and it looked interesting, the logo and everything. And I remember, I think I had the CD, and I saw a picture of John Sykes. I'm like, wow, John Sykes. Well, who's singing? And I was surprised that it was John Sykes, and more surprised that his voice was so good.
Hmm.
And the album is really good. And I was kind of surprised that didn't take off. It had a couple pretty big budget videos on MTV. I think I know one was for Valley of the Kings, which is a fantastic song. And I think the other was from Jelly Roll, maybe one of the more
Hmm.
rocking songs off that album. Both great. The whole album's great. But it seemed to me like I felt sad when I heard about John Sykes dying, because I felt like he never got his due, and maybe because he was young, 65 in the grand scheme of things isn't old. I mean, I'm 55, so I'd like to think that my life isn't going to be over in 10 years. So 65 is pretty young, all things considered. And I thought that there'd be at some point John Sykes would come back in
Yeah.
some band or whatever, maybe a reemergence of Blue Murder or just something. It just, you know, he's one of those guys that I just kind of thought in the back of my mind that no, he's got something up his sleeve. He's going to come back. He's going to be huge. He's going to get his due. And it's really sad that he didn't, because he really deserved it. I mean, really talented. Everything you guys said about his playing, spot on. I mean, just an amazing, electrifying guitar player. And he just looked so cool. I mean,
Yeah.
he was like a rock god.
Yeah.
He's at the main, that Les Paul, the way he played. Oh my God. His solos on Thunder and Lightning are just incredible. Solos on even before that, solos on Spellbound Crazy Nights, really good. Just a really gifted, talented musician that we unfortunately lost at a young age. So yeah, it's really sad. It's really
Hmm.
sad. But that's where I am with it.
All right, Butch.
Yeah, I mean, I I have to echo what everyone else said about Sykes. I mean, you talk about a guy that had everything going for him in terms of, everyone's already said that looked great, played phenomenal, like phenomenal guitar player, great songwriter, ripping lead player, killer voice too. Like Darren was saying, I mean, I didn't realize the dude could sing that well till the Blue Murder record came out, and then of course, in 2001 when they did the when he and Scott Gorham took that Thin Lizzy thing out on the road in tribute to Phil, he sounded great then too. And unfortunately, it's the only time I got to see John Sykes live was which I guess if you're going to see him, there's nothing wrong with seeing him play, a bunch of great Thin Lizzy songs. But I didn't get to see him with Whitesnake um, from the Slide It In era. I never did get to see Blue Murder, so it's kind of a bummer because I would have liked to see him play live. My first exposure to Sykes was same as Darren. It was seeing the when I used to park myself in front of MTV and that video for Slow and Easy came out, and you know that I liked the song well enough. I thought the band look was cool. He obviously looked great, and it was total rock god type of thing. It took me. I didn't pick the album up right away. I actually heard a cover band at a fair or something like that was playing "Love Ain't No Stranger," and I went out and they must have done a good enough job because I'm like, I like that song, and uh, I went out and bought the record, and it's one of those ones that I just play over and over again over the years. All or Nothing, phenomenal song.
Yep.
Always love that song. Guilty of Love, like Thin Lizzy esque all the way. Slide It In, great title track. Again, love it. And a Stranger, Gambler. I mean, every song in that record is just like boom, 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 boom. It's all great. And I actually didn't know that there were two versions of that record. The one that I grew up with was the US one. I only ever knew the band is like at that point. I didn't even when I first heard about it, I didn't even know there was a that they had a whole thing going on before Sykes was in the band. I was like, it's Coverdale, Sykes, Cozy Powell, and Neil Murray. I'm like, I didn't know there was a whole bluesier kind of thing before then. And it's fun. It was fun digging into the catalog, but Slide It In is awesome. And then they kind of disappeared for a while, and the next thing you know, I'm in a record store and I see that self-titled one came out, and bought that and was confused. Um, I hadn't realized what was going on in the band that Sykes was out, and it's a total bummer because there's a couple songs I could do without hearing again, but just from them being overplayed. But it is a real shame that record being as big as it was. I mean, it really should have been the record that
Yeah.
made him like a household name. And I'm not gonna. It's not. It's when I say that it's criminal, I don't mean it in the way like the way that the Osbournes like screwed over Daisley and Kerslake or anything like that. But it's just like a total bummer that he didn't really get his due for that record because no one really knew other than people that are like already in the know about the band, about him. I thought Blue Murder might take off a little bit more. That was a bit of a grower for me. I'm one of the few people I know that prefers Nothing But Trouble to the self-titled one. I love the song Dance on that record, and I love We All Fall Down, both killer
Yeah, great
songs.
song.
Um, and I don't even know why he would have shared vocals on there. I love John's voice. I mean, he shared vocals with Kelly Keeling on some of that record, and I don't get it because Kelly's good, but Sykes just has his own vibe that I think was really cool. One of the things that John already showed is, the Tigers record. This is all stuff, after the White Snake, and over the years, got back into that, and and then after I found out about Thin Lizzy after Whitesnake, and I love this record. Man, The Sun Goes Down is tremendous on here, and of course, Cold Sweat is one of the best songs Sykes ever wrote. But and then there's this song on here on this Please Don't Leave Me, like really great song you did with Phil. I just got this actually. It's got a bunch of other stuff on it too, but what a great song. Like he just had so much talent, and it's one of those ones that when you look back, there's musicians and over time that you always wonder how they didn't get bigger than they were. And really with him, I mean, really it's like everything was in place. Like some bands you could point to and say, well, the image wasn't quite there, or well, the playing was great, but the songwriting wasn't as good. Or some people, it's like the songs are good, but he's not, there's nothing remarkable about that. But I mean, Sykes was like the whole deal. Yeah, and it's a bummer like that. He just kind of went into hibernation or something. Like no one heard from him for years. And I think, like Tony was saying, I think we all just assumed, there was like a running. Butch Jones brought it up. Is that running joke for a while? None of us knew he was sick, and there was that running joke for a while, about having his face on the side of milk cartons and stuff. Like where is he? Like,
yeah,
it's like, well, I hope that whatever he recorded, if he was happy with it, and that the family and have his blessing to put the stuff out. I hope it sees the light of day. I'd like to hear what he was working on. I think his music deserves to be heard. And it's a shame. 65 is definitely way too young. Way too young to go for anyone. But it's one of these ones. This is one of the musicians that I kind of like was in. I heard about as I was getting into music, so I kind of grew up. So a lot of our heroes are going to go, and so this is one of those ones that's a bummer, because the records that he's been on have been such a big part of my listening over the years. Like I said, like Slide It In is still a constant player for me. Oddly enough, I went to grab it. I don't know why the hell I don't have that on vinyl yet, so I have to rectify that right away. I have that double, that double anniversary CD that has the Mel Galley playing the Leeds version, and then Sykes the US mix, which, man, I like them both, but that US mix I just think is superior. It's heavier, and I just like it more. But yeah, I mean, I hope wherever he is, he's jamming. So it's a shame. It's a real loss.
With Phil, jamming with Phil.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get
Tony,
that
you
follow up
said,
to Thunder and Lightning.
yeah. Tony, you said you had some stuff you were going to share with us.
Oh yeah, I've got quite the collection. I didn't even bring everything out. I mean, I busted out some. Of course, I've got my Tigers records. Of course, that's one thing you got. There's a single for the "Don't Stop By" single from the album here, and I've got a cool compilation record that came out from Tigers, and so. Butch mentioned the single that he did with Phil Lynott, which that's "Please Don't Leave Me."
Yeah.
And yes, a picture of the two of them on the back there. And that came out on a full album as well. And this, they call it John Sykes with Tigers of Pantang. So they put a bunch of Tiger songs on it. I think that's what the rest of the CD is as well that Butch showed. But I saw this and I was like, man, that's just a great picture. I've got to buy. I love the shot on the back. He's actually playing a white Les Paul there as well. It's kind of cool. And of course, I've got my Thunder and Lightning. And here is where the sun goes down from Thunder and Lightning. Cold Sweat. And here is a Thunder and Lightning single, and it's actually autographed. I got John's autograph on the back and Scott Gorham. Wow. So I saw John Sykes with the Thin Lizzy lineup that toured in the early 2000s. I saw him 5 times, and it was over a few year period. And it was always just amazing to see him. It was John Sykes, Scott Gorham. They had Tommy Aldridge on drums, Marco Mendoza on bass, and they did that album. That was the live album. I think Darren Wharton is included on that as well on keyboards. But the last 2 times I saw him 2 days in a row. I saw him in Jackson, Northern Virginia, and then I saw him at a place called Thunderdome in Maryland that was only there for a short period the next night. And they had Randy Gregg that played with Angel. You familiar with him, Butch? Yeah, Randy was playing, and they had Michael Lee on drums, who played with Page and Plant and Little Angels. Sadly, he passed away about 10 years ago. But man, I mean, Tommy Aldridge playing Thin Lizzy stuff. I mean, Tommy's great. Tommy's a metal machine. But Michael Lee played with that swing of Brian Downey. So it just flowed so much better. Like, wow, this just sounds excellent. Yeah. But and there's my Live Life. Yeah. My that's my Japanese slide it in. So that's where I came in with John Sykes as well. Slide it in. I remember seeing the Slow and Easy video, and I went out and bought that tape. I loved it, and I hadn't even discovered Thin Lizzy yet. I just loved that Slide It In tape. And I think the second thing I ended up picking up by Whitesnake, I was looking into imports one day, and I found a import cassette of Saints and Sinners. So I picked that up, and I was like, this is kind of sounds kind of old. You're thinking it's probably like less than 10 years old. But to us as kids, that kind of sounds like old music, But it was okay. I liked it. I thought it was pretty cool. So when the 87 album came out, I immediately go out and buy it. And I'm going, there's 2 songs on here, Crying in the Rain and Here I Go Again. I know these songs. They're on Saints and Sinners. These sound so much better. But actually, before I bought the 1987 record, of course I got that here as well. Japanese of that. And I've got a bunch of singles and stuff from this album. There's a radio promo, like just for Still of the Night. And I saw the video for Still of the Night, and I'm going, I didn't even know John Sykes wasn't in the band. I'm like, who are these guys in the video? That kind of looks, that's Tommy Aldridge. That kind of looks like Vivian Campbell in it. I don't know who the other guy is. And then I'm like, I didn't know. And then I remember calling a good friend of mine and saying, I just saw this Whitesnake video, and I don't know who these guys are in the video, Well, like day later or something, I find out it's Adrian Vandenberg and Rudy Sarzo. And I think the reason I didn't recognize Rudy Sarzo is because he had orange hair, where he bleached his hair, and it was like,
they all had their hair.
Didn't look like, he was up there licking the bass and all. I still didn't recognize him. It just didn't look like Rudy from Quiet Riot. But when I got that album, man, I just loved it. It was such a great record. I think about my senior year of high school with that record, because it was just, that was my senior year, and it just played and played, and it was in everybody's car, and everybody was listening to it. And of course, then I found out that the band had changed, of course, and really didn't know the backstory until years later. I've got that box set that came out, a few years back, and it's got a disc of demos and stuff, and it's got you just hear Coverdale and Sykes working together, coming up with these songs, and it's like, I think Sykes is playing riffs, and I think David is just like playing slapping his legs or something for drum beats or something, because but it's just amazing to hear that stuff come together, because I saw him on that tour, but of course it was the lineup that we all know from the videos, because Vivian wasn't at the show I was at. He had flown home for emergency or something, family emergency, and they only had Vandenberg at the show. They were opening for Motley Crue when I saw him. But then, like I said, just loved it. Blue Murder comes out. I remember seeing the video for Valley of the Kings when it like world premiered, because this is like, I'm a major fan of this record, of course. I've got so much stuff. I mean, there's a 12-inch single for Riot.
Nice.
I've got there's a Jelly Roll single. I've got numerous CD singles that they did. They did one for Valley of the King, and they did one for they did one for Valley of the Kings as a CD single, and I've got a CD single for Jelly Roll, and a couple of different versions of the record that came out on CD. And this was one I found. I just ran across on Discogs one day. It's a promo copy of the cassette, and it's got the little bio inside of it. And I was like, it looks like an audio book,
Yeah.
But I thought that was pretty cool, so I had to buy that, But Blue Murder, just love that record. And I think one of the things that really why that didn't break out more was it was right at the tail end of all of the glam hair metal type stuff, But they went out on tour with Bon Jovi on the New Jersey tour on that album. I mean, that should have really broke them, I mean, being in front of that audience, because I always regret I didn't go to that concert, because I like Bon Jovi, I'll admit it, but at that time period, I was all into thrash mostly, and it was a few things like Blue Murder that I did like and stuff, and Whitesnake, but I was just sick of Bon Jovi by then. It was just, and I had friends going to the concert. I was like, I'm not going to that show, And then my buddy came back and said, man, Blue Murder opened the show last night. I'm like, what? I would have gone for that. And then they played a club, and I missed them at the club due to a job that I was working. Second shift job, and I found out like the last minute that they were playing, and I couldn't get off and go, so I didn't get a chance to see them either. But yeah, that second album, Butch mentioned he really liked it. Nothing But Trouble's great. There's a CD single for We All Fall Down.
Great song.
A great song, yeah. They had a music video for that, and I even have a live. It's a live. You can see they got so much light in here from the screen, but that's a live bootleg that came out. And I have like a best of CD here that John autographed. It's a
nice.
I got a few things autographed when I did see him. I got a couple pictures with him and stuff, but it wasn't like I did brought a bunch of stuff to get signed or anything. Is at the time period, I guess I just didn't want to have to carry it around with me or whatever. But yeah, then we go to his solo stuff. I've got all the CDs. There's a Screaming Blue Murder Live.
That's a great album.
Great record. This is one of the ones that when this came out, I think it stayed in my car player for like a month before I ever took it out. It was just so great. Here's the first Sykes record. It's called Out of My Tree. It's the first one under his own name, just doing it under the Sykes banner. There's a Sykes. There's a bootleg live album from that tour from Japan. His next record was called 20th Century, and that's a really good one. And then he did a whole album of nothing but ballads, and this is called was it Loveland. And then of course Nuclear Cowboy was the last studio album, but in 2005 he put this out. It's called Bad Boy Live, and if I could highly recommend anybody watching this, if you love John Sykes, seek this record out. It's a live album from Japan. I think it's Marco Mendoza and Tommy Aldridge and Derek Sherinian are the band, and they're doing, Whitesnake, Thin Lizzy, and Sykes solo songs. It's too bad he never broke out and did any Tiger stuff, because that would have been really cool to hear, like Hellbound or something like that. Because he could have sung it, he could. But yeah, it's a shame, man. It's like I was talking about that Eddie Trunk interview. He said that that he was good friends with him, and he would email him, and he'd email him back, and he had took him out like a couple of years back and let him hear that whole album completed. And but he said over the last 2 years he's reached out a couple of times via email and got nothing, and that he thought that was kind of odd, but he said John's kind of eccentric, so I'll just kind of keeps to himself. But so he didn't know that he was sick, and it's just a shame. But I think he has a couple of kids that are, I think they're adults now. I know his son is the little boy on the cover of the Nothing But
Oh, yeah.
Trouble record. Another thing about that record too, Butch, you were talking about how good it is. That record came out 5 years after the debut Blue Murder album. It was a 5 year period. So I was surprised at that in 1994 that Geffen even released it, but I guess
Mhm.
they were under contract to do it. But it is a good record, and it just got brushed under the rug here in the States. Now I think it did okay in Japan, but that was it. But yeah, I could talk about John Sykes stuff all night because, like I said, I'm just a big fan. And anytime I find something cool, with him on it, I got to buy it. One more thing I did want to mention too. There's a Hughes Turner Project album. It's Glenn Hughes and Joe Lynn Turner, and there's this track on here called "Heaven's Missing an Angel." And John Sykes does the guitar solo on here, and he is just brilliant. I mean, he makes it cry. It's an amazing solo. So something to check out.
All right. Yeah. Thanks
Nice.
for sharing all that. That's great.
Yeah, that's awesome, Tony.
Thanks.
All right. Well, there's some of our thoughts on John Sykes. Let us know some of your thoughts in the comments down below. Thanks everybody out there for watching, and we'll see you at the next Dudes Talking Metal. And John Sykes, rest in peace.